Okay, hello. First caveat of the evening. One, welcome. So glad you're here. So excited to dive into this conversation. Caveat being that was genuine welcome. Caveat is that I live in an apartment, if you didn't know, so I cannot anticipate any potential ambient noise. I did upgrade my microphone slightly since we last chatted in this format, but I'm not 100% sure what we're sounding like. So bear with me. I am still learning and I appreciate you being here nonetheless. Go ahead and leave me a message. Let me know you're here, you're excited, or don't. No pressure, but I'm excited to chat with everybody because while I was in the sneak peek this morning, the chat was decidedly flying. At one point, it froze for me. And honestly, that may have been for the best because it was a little distracting. It wasn't really a place where, you've been in a crowded live stream chat before, I'm sure we all have. And then when it finally unfroze, the tenor was starting to switch and people were starting to get a little bit more impatient. So I don't know, maybe it would have been better if it was all frozen, but I knew that I would be chatting with you all here now. So I'm very excited to dive in. There's a lot to talk about. I know we both got more and less than we expected today in some ways. I'm going to be honest with you. I was not expecting a full teaser or full trailer today because of the timeline of release. Let me know if you expected similarly or differently, but that's just kind of what I went in expecting. So honestly, today went about how I expected it to, though I will say I was expecting Luke and Nicola to talk a little bit more during the panel, but that is what it is. And it feels like they were really trying to set expectations for us this season. When the chat for me finally unfroze, it was starting to call out the lack of Jonathan Bailey and Simone on the panel. But I think that was probably pretty intentional because they were talking pretty specifically about how we're changing focus this season and how we are able to focus on a new couple and this idea of these people that we know or these background couples coming into the forefront, as we've talked about maybe ad nauseum to you as a viewer on this channel in relation to this type of romance being translated to the screen for the first time and the kind of joy and wonder of that, which I do think they touched on today. But I think they really want us to set that expectation that that's what we're in for. So I imagine it also could have just been scheduling conflicts. I don't know. So yeah, excuse me while I am not able to talk and read at the same time. Yeah, Luke didn't talk much at all. I will say I am very happy that they still seem to be so on board with the genre. That's one thing that really not surprised me because I have actor friends, but it really made me happy as a viewer with the season one, kind of seeing this refreshingly earnest take on romance as a genre and treating it with gravity and levity at the same time. And it seems like this season, they're really leaning into that. According to the panel, especially this emphasis, I really picked up on the emphasis. We'll talk the whole gamut and throw in the chat specific things you want to touch on as well, because I feel like everything just kind of washed over me. I tried frantically to take notes during the panel, but I know I probably didn't pick up on everything or I will forget in this moment. But the emphasis or reference to awkward banter, which I perked up at that, and I'm still trying to figure out because I love banter. I'm not going to lie to you, but I feel like recently we've really been relying on banter in a way that it doesn't always read, or sometimes, at least in books, feels too focused on the banter, or the banter feels forced. So I'm not saying that I'm expecting that from this season by any means, but I'm very intrigued to see how banter is going to translate into this season and how it's going to operate with these characters. But that's something that I definitely picked up on in the moment. So yeah. Okay, let me think here about what... Actually, before we dive into the real meat and potatoes of the panel, can we and the preview, obviously, can we talk briefly about this PR marketing campaign, just because I find it fascinating? This whole like Bridgerton themed sponsored wedding. I don't know how I feel about it. Like, on one hand, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. You're going to try and find every tie-in and opportunity. And on the other hand, I'm like, that feels a little forced. I don't know how I feel about that, but people seem excited. So maybe it's just me. Maybe that is the single gal in me, but I don't know. It feels a little forced to me, but they were hinting surprises. So I don't know. I will say this. I will give Golda this. In the panel, she made it like seem a lot more smooth than the introduction of that really felt. Yeah, like, okay. Maybe it's because during the bad times, that sounds, I recognize that sounds reductive, but I am new to live streaming on YouTube and I don't know what sets off what alarms. But in 2020, a couple of my friends got married like digitally via some company's sweepstakes. And so we went to their virtual wedding with the company's virtual representative that was like their character. I don't know why words are so hard for me right now. So that's what it made me think of. But okay, I titled this video trying to stay somewhat focused. I apologize, friends. Again, let me know if you need to rein me in, or if you have things you want to talk about. I titled this live stream, this one's for the Wallflowers, because that's what I really took from the panel. That felt like the central idea of the panel in some ways to me. And for me, that has always been the central idea of Penelope's story. And that, I think, is part of what has always made me so emotional and what made me so emotional today. You may have seen the short that I posted, which is honestly the most like authentic in the moment emotion I have probably ever posted online, just because of the vulnerability of that. But, and I'm not pretending that's anything like revolutionary or super brave or novel by any means, but something about, and I know that Penelope really resonates with people, but the idea of the wallflower. And I think that having that tie in to the ideas that we got in the clip, I know the chat was going crazy toward the end, very discontent in some ways, like demanding this sneak peek. And I'll give it to them. The panel, the thing was labeled sneak peek, but at the same time, I could see the kind of PR marketing spin of it. So yeah, but the idea that we got, not only the reference to the wallflowers throughout, but in that clip, we got the reference to the spinster, and that, and Penelope's idea that she is a spinster and how she is seen as a spinster in this world. And also she talks about this being her third year. There is a time reference there that in retrospect, in this moment, I should have done, because I know there's been a lot of talk about whether there's going to be time jumps this season. She talks about it being the third season, or she's been out for 3 seasons. So it doesn't seem like there's going to be a significant jump there. And she references her mother's ball as if it is more recent, potentially, like last season for both of us. But it kind of mirrors these scenes in the books where she catches, right? We talked last year, the year before, about that conversation that she kind of stumbles into with the Bridgerton brothers and Colin's comments there and her kind of flippant response. And so this is a little bit sharper and more pointed than her kind of flippant public response amongst more Bridgertons. And so here we have that moment that you haven't missed anything, because we're talking about the sneak peek clip right now, and we're going to talk about some of the more general panel comments, I think, because it is very much, at its heart, this was for the fans. It was a treat, but it was a PR marketing event, right? So, but that moment felt very much for the fans, because I know there was a lot of conversation, or at least I was involved in conversations last year about, or the year before, I've lost all sense of time, about that scene and about Penelope overhearing that from Colin and what that was going to mean, and just not having her get that moment of confrontation and kind of vindication in some ways. Vindication isn't the right word, I don't think. But I think that they talked very strategically at the beginning of the panel about scenes that fans of the books wanted and how receptive this new showrunner has been to that was referenced in the panel. And I do want to talk about the new showrunner at some point, whose name I did not write down because I am a jerk. I will have to Google that. But there were references throughout the panel about these fan favorite scenes, and they have been intentionally, as we know, teasing the fan favorite scenes for a while now, basically since they announced, that this was going to be Penelope and Colin's season. But I found it interesting what scene they gave us like the sneak peek clip of, or the clip versus the picture. So they referenced in the beginning, or at the beginning of the panel, oh, the fans are going to be happy because we have these scenes they've been clamoring for. And granted, I haven't been as involved in online conversations to some extent because I have been trying to not get too deep, so I still have my own thoughts too. It's a balance, I recognize that. But I don't remember people clamoring for the hand cut scene in as many ways as people were clamoring for like the end scene that we did get with the sneak peek, or, the carriage scene that's been referenced, the mirror scene that has been referenced. That we got a reference to the carriage scene today. Didn't, to my catch, get a reference to the mirror scene today. That's fine. We've got them already. But I think the hand cut scene is interesting because it does, and I did catch someone in the chat, to interrupt my own thought, talking about the drawing room, which is another scene that I personally feel very invested in, and I know other people are very invested in if we're getting. So the hand cut scene was interesting because I hadn't caught as much chatter, but it does make me interested because they didn't say what context we're getting that in. And they talked a lot about getting some of these moments or getting some of these Easter eggs, even if they're not in full context, which I think we've seen even in last season. But I found it interesting because are we going to get that? This is a lot of words to say this, I'm sorry. Are we going to get the context of that scene? Like, does this confirm that Colin is going to be a writer in the scene? Does the use of the pen emoji confirm that Colin and Whistledown Penelope are going to have that in common? Or is that just a reference to Lady Whistledown? It's still unclear, or at least I haven't caught that buzz. So if you've caught more about that, let me know. But I found that really interesting. And then, yeah, okay, actually, before we dive in here, let me pull up some of my general notes. You let me know what you're interested in talking about. And then let's dive through or work through the episode list after I read this. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I really, really like, to talk on the Pen and Eloise thing, I really like how they handled this in this panel, because there has been a lot of, I would almost argue, vitriol aimed at both characters. Eloise for her kind of disconnect and her inability to see Pen and Pen's reality, which I will argue that sometimes I have strayed into that realm mentally. And then a lot of real anger at Pen, this idea that she is unforgivable and unredeemable in some ways, unworthy of a love story because of what she has done to others through her writing. And there isn't this room for more complexity. And also this idea that because we have had Penelope and Eloise since the beginning in a way that is much more direct than in the books. Yes, Penelope was a fan favorite in the books. She was present throughout the preceding books, but she didn't have as large of a presence or story arc. So she has to, as we've talked about before, both of them have to have arcs to kind of act. They have to have a different starting stasis than even when they get to the beginning of their season. So we need that kind of contention and that dramatic action. And so it makes sense, unfortunately, that Penelope and Eloise are going to have this rift for them and their character development. Is it directly contradictory to the books? Yes. Yes, it is. Is the second epilogue where Eloise finally finds out that Lady Whistledown is Penelope? That's always felt like kind of neat to me. And that's fine in the world in which those books exist, because I love romance and I understand that that's a different medium. But for the translation, this makes sense. And so I loved particularly Claudia's exploration of that nuance and that complexity. And it seems like she was being very gracious and pointed in that comment and in that exploration that these characters are learning and growing and what that looks like. And also in Nicola's statement, where she talks about how Colin had to be knocked off of his pedestal. Yes, I did almost say Luke multiple times. I don't know why. I've known Colin as a character for probably half my life at this point. But the idea that he had to be knocked off of the pedestal. And so in some ways, both of these characters are getting knocked off of their pedestals this season, because Colin has created a pedestal for Penelope in different ways. And I think that we see that very much so in the sneak peek today, because we see Colin deliver this, I didn't want to say it, but I missed you. And you're going to force me to say it, but I missed you. And he expected a very particular response from Penelope that she did not give him. And so that was immediately the kind of upsetting of the stasis and kind of the faltering there. And we know, at least based on the book, that we're going to see some more contention there, that he is going to see Penelope in a way that he never has before in a lot of different ways. Yeah, yes, I assume you're talking about in relation to Penelope and Eloise, but I think there's a lot of deviation, and I think that they were prepping us for a lot of deviation this season. I think it was kind of like a soft launch of deviations, and all of them, I think, are driven by dramatic action. And we've talked about this multiple times, but in relation especially to Penelope having more suitors and that there's going to be this element of jealousy, the book itself, which I will be doing a read along for that. And I will talk more about like my thoughts on the read along schedule later. If you saw my community tab post, community, you know what I mean. You know that I have some thoughts there. So, but if you've been with me a second, you know that I personally find the book Romancing Mr. Bridgerton, which I have my copy of right here, kind of lopsided or very much divided, which I do want to talk about in relation to the episodes and the idea of splitting this into two parts. But there is a lack of dramatic action sometimes in the book, because it's kind of playing, the first half of the book is kind of playing against the reader in that it's trying to not show us things. It's not trying to show its hand and reveal the big reveal too early. But then that keeps us in the dark of some of this more, some more development and opportunities there. And so it just is a little bit more lopsided, at least to me. Yes, would love to have you for the read along. Basically, broad swaps. We'll get more into the nuts and bolts later, but just, you know, kind of reading at our own pace. I'll do a story graph and then we'll have another live to chat about it. Yes. Yes, never preparing. And I think that they're doing it. It's hard because I think that anytime something is translated from one medium to another, particularly from the page to either the screen or the stage or what have you, it's hard because you do have that sense of the source material and you want your favorite things. But I find where it succeeds the most is where it kind of captures the spirit of the thing and still gives enough of those fan favorite nods while still updating and telling the story it needs to tell in the medium it needs to tell. Now, granted, did I agree with every change in season 2? No. I still really struggle with the characterization of Edwina in season 2, I'm not going to lie, but I understand giving her a more central role and a more active role as well. So I still absolutely adored season 2. So I don't have ultimate qualms with that change. Yes. Okay. Thank you, Ashley, because I did want to talk about this. And it's something I was thinking about the whole panel, especially when they were throwing so many questions at Golda and Adjoa, and listening to Adjoa speak. I could listen to her speak all day. And if you do want to listen to her speak all day, she narrates the Brown Sisters audiobooks by Talia Hibbert. So you can do that. But the Penelope Danbury friendship is so central to the books for me. And especially if we're exploring these more in-depth emotional lives of our older women in the cast, I love that. And I think having that parallel, and having this idea of spinsterhood or being alone, older, not looking like the worst fate, but exploring that with more complexity and nuance in Danbury, and seeing her see someone she loves in Penelope in some ways. Words are still hard, apparently, but also this idea, we now know the fact that they've named it a lost love or called Lord Ledger a great love in this is interesting to me, because that's not how I would have read it. I think that's how it was intended, but that puts a different tenor on it, right? Because now we have a character with a great kind of unfulfilled, unrequited love in her past, and then seeing this mirrored in Penelope. Like, she's sharp. She knows that, probably the whole time knows that Penelope is in love with Colin. Something more. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. I don't remember where I was before I went on that little side quest, which is great because that's the whole point. I love that we are talking about this. Thank you so much for talking with me. What do you say we look? Was I talk? You know what? It doesn't matter. Let's look at the episode. Oh, yep. Yes. Speaking of two, along with that friendship, and I know you're like, Melody, shut up about the Smythe Smiths. Smythe. I don't remember. I'm not going to lie to you, but I really want that at the beginning still. It's still one of my favorites. Also, in context of the first 2 minutes that we got today, and them introducing it as the first 2 minutes, I feel like they mean like the first 2 minutes that we've gotten, because it didn't feel like the first 2 minutes of the show. It felt like there was something that had happened before where we entered. Was that just me? Yeah. Yes. Yes. Honestly, I've been thinking about doing a reread of those books too. I'm a little nervous because I was like peeking around Goodreads reviews. Not that should ever, sway anything, but I'm like, what if they don't hold up? Because I remember loving those so much, because those all had more of a Wallflower feel as well. And I love a Wallflower. I relate to a Wallflower, to be like vulnerable and honest for a second. And I think so many of us do, in whatever ways, even if it's just like in our most internal like lives. So I think that there's something really rewarding in that. Yes, the music, how it goes, and where everyone hates it. And Penelope always goes and she sits like closer to the front because she knows everyone hates it. And then like her and her sister, at least in the book, get like stuck at the front while her sister gets stuck. Penelope meant to be there. And Danbury ends up there and is like causing mischief. And then they hide like the pastry in the plant, because all of that. All the opening conversation, or the conversation that we got, conceivably could have been after the musicale. It could have been them leaving the musicale. It could have been Penelope and Colin having like their first interaction, because in the book he's just gotten back. And so maybe she was putting on a face in front of society, and then they leave and he's chasing after her, and we get that. I'm probably just writing my own fan fiction there, but it's a possibility. Yes. Yeah, that is a good point. I don't know how those will play, because there is a certain level of like seeing you again for the first time at this musicale in the book, and the idea that Colin is seeing her. But I think that there is a way they could play it, especially that leads into that moment. And yes, I agree. They were still friends, so that plays a little bit more naturally. But I do agree that I want at least one Smythe Smith musicale. And the old showrunner said that they are confirmed, they are aware of these musicales in this world, which means to me that maybe we'll get that in the future. And I talked about this back in season 1, early days, like early enough days that don't go back and find it, because I'm sure as embarrassing as my inability to speak tonight is even worse. But my original expectations for the trailer, or like kind of hopes of that first trailer, is the idea of having the like beautiful music and then like having a discordant note kind of enter, and having the idea of the Smythe Smith musicale there. And so I think that could be introduced in an interesting thematic way with Colin and Penelope here, this idea of this sour note that has entered their relationship and still fit in the comedic tone that they seem to be aiming for this season. Yeah. Maybe I am just, clearly trying everything I can to get that dang musicale in here somehow, and watch me like actually hate it, because it's painful for us as viewers to hear those wrong notes. But I mean, I feel like we can make it work. Okay, let's talk briefly about these episode titles, shall we? Especially with the split. All right. Yeah. Listen, I think it's a good idea, enough that I would be kind of sad if we don't get it, to be honest. So I agree. Edwina is probably going to marry Friedrich. I'm sure I am butchering that. I apologize. We should talk about Cressida at some point, because I feel like we have introduced Cressida both more and less than in the books, in the show so far somehow. So I do want to circle back to her. Absolutely. Yes. I thought this too, because I was like, there's no way joining of hands is not a wedding. And I like the way the dynamic is played in the wedding. And I think that this happened too in season 2. That the idea of the conceit of the wedding and all that brings about were completely upended, because that's part of, I'm going to be real, that's part of what I love so much about The Viscount Who Loved Me, is that marriage of convenience. I love a marriage of convenience plotline. I love that forced proximity and this idea of this intimacy and this kind of like behind the scenes look, more intimate look at this person that you get with this guarantee of this happily ever after, right? Like, I understand it's all fantasy, don't worry. But we don't really get that, obviously, in season 2. So there are a lot of scenes from the book that are some of my favorites that we don't get in the show. So the spirit is still there, but I miss some of those scenes. So I am still hopeful that we might still get a sprinkling of those, although I worry with all of these extra introductions that they hinted at today that we're still going to have a very eclectic mix. Like, I know last season the focus on the Featheringtons was kind of contentious, and I don't think we're going to have less of that, in the sense that it's not going to be just Penelope and Colin 24/7 here, or 8. And so, yeah, I don't know how central That's going to be, especially with them saying that Benedict is taking over some of the responsibilities that Antony previously was filling. So that's interesting to me because they have made a point that Antony and Kate are coming back, but in what context? So there are scenes from that book that I would still love to see. And I because of that, I do think we might still reread that book, also just because it's my favorite, to be completely honest with you. Or one of my favorites. But the dynamic of Penelope and Colin and their marriage in the book, a lot of that kind of push and pull that happens within the marriage can happen before, I think, in the way that it's plotting out. Okay, sorry, I'm going to catch up with the chat. I also do love Out of the Shadows, Into the Light as beginning and ending titles. I love like a nice full circle. I do want to talk about 304 because it's clear to me that we're going to end on a cliffhanger there. But again, give me a second to just speed read through this because I love all this conversation. Okay, so yes. Yeah, I hope. There were so many the spoiler talk with Benedict in particular. What is our over-under on Sophie this season? Because I know we've been kind of thinking as a collective that she's going to appear. She's just going to appear at one of these balls, even back to last season. So what are we thinking? Francesca just sitting in the background eating popcorn. Yeah, I think she may also get married this season because we're going to have our hearts completely ripped out with her. Sorry, spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't read the book. I also found it interesting because there was they were teasing something early in the panel, and I've completely forgot what, in relation to our main couple. And then they just cut to an image of Francesca. I was like, cool. She is gorgeous. Love to see it. But I just found it interesting. So, old friends. Cliffhanger. We've talked about someone coming back and upsetting the dynamic for Lady Danbury, where there was reference of that in the panel. At least that's how I interpreted it. Let me know if you interpreted it a different way. I don't know what it can also be a twist on this idea that Penelope and Colin are old friends. And now the dynamic is changing. I don't know. We definitely have more reference. I find it interesting because we've got Out of the Shadows, Into the Light as a kind of overarching thematic journey here. But then we have How Bright the Moon as the second episode. So How Bright the Moon, and then we have Forces of Nature, which also still feels elemental in some ways. And then we kind of leave that just gone. So I don't know. Yes. I feel like we deserve a little bit of Francesca and John just being cute together and them getting their moment. And I think that will make, as much as Francesca's book already lands, I absolutely love Francesca's book. I think that would help it land even more in some ways. I'm already preparing for how emotionally devastated I'm going to be for her season. I also cannot think of that. I can't think of Francesca's story without thinking of Labyrinth by Taylor Swift anymore, which is a personal problem, but it works in my head. If you disagree, let me know. If you agree, validate me there. Yes. I imagine it's probably going to be a double twisty meaning in some way. Yeah. Listen, I don't consider myself someone that clowns often, but I also am having to stop myself from some clowning. All right. Yes. Eloise's new friend. Yes. Which I'm still refusing to make firm theories on because I don't want to be wrong so publicly. The end. Oh, that's an interesting theory, though. That would hurt. That would hurt me. Would that hurt any of you? Because that would hurt me. But it would also make Cressida a little bit more central because I think we're going to have to bring her back into the forefront if she's still the main antagonist for the season as she is in the book, I personally would love to see it because I want to see a mean girl brought down. But also, I wouldn't put it past the show, especially with their focus on these lives of women, of the lives of these women, and how complicated they are in a myriad of ways and how trapped they are in some ways, that they complicate Cressida as well and make us feel that kind of desperation and what pushes her to that a little bit more and make that not fully sympathetic, but a little bit more grounded in some ways. Yeah. But if she did that, and I'm not saying I'm like saying this is going to happen, but if she did that, it would also be enough of a betrayal that then the two are on similar playing fields in terms of betrayal in the ability to eventually be able to move past it, which I don't know if we will see until Eloise's season. I don't know. I feel like a lot of Eloise's growth is still being established. I feel like we're probably being prepped for the idea of characters making mistakes a little bit in the panel today for Eloise in particular, potentially. I don't know. In the book, she does stay a bully. Yeah. 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 Or at least, I don't even know if it's like she's going to be kind to her as much as like we're going to see a little bit more. And we see it a little bit in the books. But this idea that Cressida in some ways is acting out of desperation at all times. And she's cruel and she's mean because of that. But just kind of complicating the like 2000s mean girl that she is in the books, which it's so satisfying to see that brought down. I'm not going to lie to you. But I wouldn't be surprised if we got more depth there. Yeah. And I think too, like that dynamic and that tension between Penn and Whistledown is going to be so central this season because Whistledown has allowed Penelope to like purge some of this, her most like teen girl emotions and like all of these frustrations at how she's treated and overlooked again and again, but how she's expected to stand there and smile as Penn. And so I think the kind of converging of those two is going to be very interesting and is going to be the idea of like the growing up of the season in a lot of ways. Yeah. Are you more for the reconciliation this season? Because that's also a possibility. That can be a major arc this season, I would argue, especially as they do frame it or mention it as the secondary love story of the season in some ways. And just the intensity. I like that they recognize, listen, I know they're shippers of all ships, and I recognize that. But I also really appreciate the gravity that serious friendship is given in that relationship as well. I don't know. Other than that, and maybe it's because it's been like a year or two now since I last reread the book, which of course I will be doing shortly again. And also just a moment of appreciation because I have my library discard copy that I bought for a dime at my library book sale when I worked in the library as a teenager after I'd read the series. And it's kind of like the platonic ideal of a romance novel for me. I love a mass market. I love when the spine has already, I don't break spines. I can't, but I love a romance novel where the spine has already been broken for me, but it doesn't feel like the pages are going to fall out. So also, that's the step back. So this is the 2000s vision, artist's vision of Colin and Penelope. So I am so excited for the reality we're going to see realized in this season. I'm so excited. But other than that, sorry, tangent yet again. Other than that, I'm not sure with these titles that I can really get a sense. Listen, Ashley, no judgment. it's probably a little too obsessive that I don't break spines, and I've really been working on that. I don't know where we're gonna go, like, or what I'm getting from these titles. Like, does it tell me? I don't know. You know what? Actually, I don't know that Edelweiss would list it. I find a lot of my releases and upcoming releases I source via like Edelweiss catalogs, but I don't know that I've seen when the tie-in is going to become available. Yeah. But I will be very interested to see what that cover is going to look like. And now that you say that, a light bulb is going off, because I saw someone online saying that they were like hoping that we'd get a book cover today or something about a book cover being released. And I was like, the book's been out since the 2000s. And now I'm on the right page. Just a little slow today. Yes. The whole church dynamic, like, I like the action of it. I like the intrigue of it. I like the idea of them just being in this random church. We know we're still getting the carriage scene in whatever way, but like something about that reveal is just so clunky. And it's probably because the book spends so much time trying to keep it from us, and it just feels so out of left field in some ways. I say, like, I know left field. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I didn't see the end of that. Bring it, yeah. Which I think that they've set up. Yeah, there's so much they can do with this. I will be interested to see, because I mean, we have this idea of jealousy being established, this new suitor who I am both intrigued by and excited about for the potential there, and understand that we do have to give him time to establish and have to feel like that relationship is a real threat in some ways, so that Colin feels like it is a real threat in some ways. But also, I don't want to lose all of our time for our main characters either. They're very good about like the angst of the audience and just like wanting more screen time from our leads. I will give them that. But kind of using that to channel Colin's anger from the books that I'll admit as an adult, I really struggle with. I really struggled with him last time I reread it, just because it felt, it was really frustrating for me. Colin felt a lot more immature, which, to be fair, he is. And I understand the frustration of like not knowing where he is in the world and thinking he's found this thing that's his, and then discovering that Penelope is so much better at it, and then like just feeling so adrift. But like the anger in the book came out directed then almost at Penelope in ways that made me kind of uncomfy. It wasn't like the sexy kind of like lead up of clashing. The balance fell off. And so I think this gives the opportunity for like that jealousy to spilleth over in an interesting way. And I think the way that they've talked about like the banter and the awkwardness of things, kind of like balancing, having these two sides of things potentially. Yes. Yeah, I think especially because we've seen such like a puppy dog Colin in the show in a lot of ways. Like, and we've talked about this before, the idea that like show Colin is not book Colin. Book Benedict is not show Benedict. In some ways, show Benedict is more show Colin, at least in the way that he operates within the ballroom scenes. So yeah, I'll be very interested to see how that works. Okay. Yes, whiny is a good way. It felt like the guy in an MFA program that was convinced he was the best writer in the program, and when a woman brought something into workshop that was obviously 10 times better, he was just really mad about it. I want to be clear, I haven't been in an MFA program, but I know. Listen, I've worked with a lot of creatives. Yeah, Okay, I'm glad I'm not the only one that was kind of uncomfy with that anger. And I want to believe that they have picked up on that because they've made changes, and Benedict especially so far, that I think precede changes for his book for things that made me uncomfy. That being said, there were changes that were not made to season 1. That's all I'm going to say about that. This is a great question. Sorry, there's going to be some sirens. We're waiting. Sorry. I can cut all this out in Not Lives. I think the Lady Whistledown thing is interesting because I would have said wholeheartedly yes, but also the idea, one, that they revealed it so early upsets the dynamic. So I don't know what they're going to do. And they have this like thing that they can hold on to and keep pulling the dramatic strings up, because one thing that I find really interesting in the books is after it's revealed that Penelope is Lady Whistledown, the Lady Whistledown intros to the chapters just stop. And so, I mean, obviously there are reasons for that in the books that we don't get it in subsequent books, but like even in the book, like once we know, it's like, all right, jig's up. I don't have to write these intros to these chapters anymore. Actually, yeah, no, we still get them for a bit in the book. So I just don't know. Like, are they going to keep it like a family secret? Because that is still a very interesting dynamic for the show to explore. It's something the show has built its entire dynamic around. So I don't know. I would be interested to chime in the chat if you have thoughts on that, because I think it's a good one. I like this. But Colin is a gremlin that likes to rile up Anthony. TV Colin is a college kid who wants to be an adult. I think that is a very succinct and eloquent way to put that. Yeah. Great. Perfect. Listen, I've been close enough to the MFA dynamic that I feel like, or felt like, it wasn't too far off. Oh my gosh. Okay. I want to read this, Ashley. No. I can just see it. A man not understanding Annabelle Lee. Yeah, I can see it. That, not saying all by any means, but like we know the moment. Maybe. Yes, that is a possibility. And I think, and granted, these aren't tied together in the sense that the whole ton has to know. We don't even know if we're going to get the like bet of it this season. At least I don't. Have I missed something? Let me know if I have. But I'm still so married to the idea, especially because they talked about how they're going to be amping up the visuals this season, because as an audience, we become so enamored of that and we expect that. And then now it's kind of like a challenge. And yes, I'm embellishing there somewhat on extrapolating on what was said in the panel. But I'm so married to the idea of those Lady Whistledown papers just raining down with Penelope and Colin like over the party. Like that's just something that's so striking mentally it's striking to me. So I'm liking the story you're building in the chat, Catherine. Please keep going. Gregory, I'm so excited to get to Gregory. I'm so excited. We're not rushing anything, but the youngins, yes. Oh, that would be an interesting turn, wouldn't it? You know what? You're right. Thank you for sushing me there. Speaking of the emojis, though, with the diamond and them talking in the panel today about the idea that Queen Charlotte is bored of the business as usual, which I'm shocked that that's what that was saying. Who do we think? Who do we think it's going to be? Like, I don't think it can be Penelope. because she's been out so long and there's no like established like relationship there that I remember between her and the queen. Granted, my memory is not perfect, as evidenced by this entire discussion, but I don't know. Okay, that's a good point. Like the stress has slightly alleviated for her, and she's like, okay, I'm done. I don't want to keep doing this. Oh, that may be it. Although, like Francesca, and the way that they kind of presented her visually, well, one, she came out last season, and she seemed she presented, right? Yeah. No, Eloise came out last season. Oh my gosh, there's too many Bridgertons. Yeah, I'll be interested to see how they present Francesca, because she seems like very, straight-laced, kind of standard potential, but there's an option there. That's true. And it feels like we're being set up for a lot of upsets this year. So like I can't rule anything out. And I won't rule anything out because, again, I don't want to be wrong completely, loudly, and publicly, which I'm sure I will be. So it's fine. Case in point, that whole like scenario I created for the before of the scene we got today. Okay, I'm looking at my notes. Okay, so we also talked in the panel about obviously the idea of this one's for the Wallflowers, this being, the idea of this resonating so much because of the Wallflower angle, but also this idea that this is friends to lovers, even if we're not starting, like complete, like there's going to be an attempt to reconcile that friendship. And it seems like there's going to be an attempt from Penelope to be like, I'm over it. We're just friends now, mentally. We know how that works. But this idea that we are with characters now that are familiar to us and how that's going to change the dynamic. And also that these characters, did Nicola call them like just big nerds? And just this idea that they're a little bit more awkward. And so I will be very interested to see how that plays out and just the dynamic of it in that aspect as well, because I admittedly don't gravitate to friends to lovers as much as a trope when I'm seeking things out, generally, but I still enjoy it. And I think this is where it's done well, where it's not just like, it's the friends to lovers trope, but it is something that we've seen organically build. And then we have that history and there's still that weight to it. So it's not like, oh, they're friends because I told you they're friends, but they're actually friends. And then that like added complication on top of that, the unrequited love, the hurt, seeing Colin come back from that, I have to assume that him offering to help Penelope find a suitor is him trying to make amends for that and her hearing that, because I don't know what else would lead into that potentially, but I don't know. Yes. Okay. Yes. I wanted to talk about this too. This idea that they are describing it as a romantic comedy. Because at first I was kind of like, oh, but like, I love the idea that this is a romance series translated to the screen. And is that going to change the dynamic? But I think that is the trick there, is just kind of like the frame of having known them having that familiarity, to have things like that banter, that kind of awkwardness that translates sometimes to more physical comedy sometimes. And just what we can expect of people, especially like with the Wallflower trope, that kind of awkwardness, Penelope kind of stepping into her own in that way. Oh, I caught the wrong one. Thank you so much for popping in. I really appreciate it. So yes, we will continue to chat about Bridgerton much more. Do not worry. And thank you all. Like, I mean, I'm not ending completely right here, but when I first started talking about Bridgerton, I worried about the balance. I didn't want to talk about it all the time and just be all Bridgerton all the time. And I worried that people would think I was talking about it too much. So I really appreciate when people pop on and encourage and want to talk about it more together. I really appreciate it, or I'm grateful for it, I think is actually the right sentiment. Okay, great. I'm at least I'm at least not completely alone there. But yes, the rom-com tropes, I had that written down. Bum, bum, bum. All of the words when they had, that's true. That's true. And that's why, I think the read-alongs will be fun too, so that we can kind of like get in the zone. And especially the idea that we're going to be breaking it into two. One, that's going to be easier, just like from a conversational like reaction, because we can kind of like dig more minutely into things. Because it's very interesting, because when I was in college, I had to do a lot of performance analysis because I was a theater student. And so we had to talk about like design choices and what they meant and how they fit the concept of the production in like really minute detail, in a way that like fandom online has always existed, but the conversations move so quickly. Like I was like, oh, so I could have just been a fangirl online doing production analysis of everything. Like these fangirls are running circles around me in terms of production analysis and like catching all of the little minute design choices that people say, oh, you're overthinking this, or oh, you're looking too closely. But like those choices have been made very specifically. And if they haven't been made very specifically, that's also a point of conversation potentially. So that is my little rant. Well, rant is a strong word. That is my thing there. Yes, I agree, which is honestly also a part of why I have kind of, I've not gotten too deep into all the spaces for my own opinions and like perspectives, but also because you just never know what you're going to get. And I have been a lurker since I got online, I say, as I am currently on a live. So I'm obviously full of it at the same time. There was something, Will. Okay. Listen. One, you're not going to escape it. I never even watched an episode of the Grease prequel, and I saw it all over TikTok. Now, granted, I haven't been on TikTok in months and months and months, but like, I don't think you're like, I admire the potential self-control, although it feels a little bit just like, I don't know. I feel like the model, they're testing out a model, because it's clear that binging isn't long-term sustainable for media, in the sense that you're going to have the big hits like Bridgerton, which I'm grateful for, don't get me wrong, but like not every show is going to hit like that, and shows need time to grow their audience, and they need, discovery. And I don't know, it's a bigger conversation than I am able to have, but I'm very interested in the model. I'm interested in them trying this out. They're obviously trying it out with a hit property that has a little bit of cachet, and there's a little bit of protection and buffer there. I will be interested. I will be interested to see. Yes. I do want to talk about Will and Alice though, actually. So thank you. That was what I was getting to. Sorry, I'm rearranging a blanket. But you may have seen in my short when I was yelling about Will. Listen, I had built a whole, because I can't read fan fiction of Bridgerton, because the books have just been so central for so long. They were some of my first romances. So I just can't imagine scenarios. I think I tried to read some Kate Anthony fan fiction after last season to kind of like get the hits of those moments I didn't get in the season. And I was just like, I couldn't. It didn't work for me. So I'm very happy for all the people it works for. But I had like this whole elaborate story in my head where I thought we were building to a gaming hell for Will. And I don't know why. I really love a gaming hell in a romance, okay? And so I really wanted him to get a gaming hell. Instead, he's getting a title. We will allow it because it means he's getting more screen time. But I'm a little bit sad, because then it would have introduced the idea of the like underworld in some ways to the show, because we don't really get the grittier side of things as much in the books, because we are very much like, this is very much a ballroom romance series. So I'm a little sad because that the building out of that world had some potential, but I also understand why they want to explore someone entering the peerage in this way. But I'm just thinking of all we could have had. I don't know if anyone has. Yeah. Will's getting a title. So we'll see how that subplot plays out as well. I don't know, but I do love Will as a character, so I'm glad that we are getting more. It seems like we'll probably get more of him this season. I don't know. He was on the panel, so it seems to me like he's probably going to have a pretty central role in the season. We touched on Benedict and all the spoilers there and potential spoilers there. If anyone has further thoughts they want to throw out on the Benedict side of things or the Eloise side of things, are we going to see them as much as a united front this season as we have in the past? I don't know. Yes, sorry, it's a gentleman's club, not a bar. You are correct. But a gentleman's club that could have become a gaming hell. That I don't know. Yeah, I honestly, he probably was becoming a little too popular because they didn't want a potential ship to become more popular than what was going to happen. So I could see that getting nixed. Okay, so they talked about the romantic comedy of the season, but they also said, or I don't know who said, but the idea of romance versus intrigue in this show. So I don't know if it's just that idea of Lady Whistledown, Penelope as Lady Whistledown being blackmailed, the idea of the kind of cloak and dagger of Colin chasing her to the church to like discover her secret or whatever. Like if that's the intrigue, like what the intrigue of the season is, or if it's going to be a more built out thing based on all of these other plots that are circling. They also seem to specifically reference something with the Featheringtons that I couldn't get a real sense of in their referencing. If anyone has a better read on that from the panel, let me know. I don't, She's All That Maybe. I feel like, I don't know that any of the rom-coms that I'm thinking of like apply. Like it's like a trope that's just so ingrained, but it would have to be She's All That, like, right? Like the preparing someone for the suitor, like it's because it's not a 10 Things I Hate About You, because it's not Taming of the Shrew. I feel like I'm mostly thinking of high school rom-coms, to be fair. So yeah, I might have to do some more. My friend Katie, who I've had on this channel before, early last year, she has a podcast all about rom-coms. So I should circle up with Katie and get her read on this. I don't remember if she watches Bridgerton, but I might need to pull in the reinforcements. I agree that Eloise isn't ready for a romance yet, which is why I really think that next season would be Benedict. My Fair Lady, yes. Potentially. Yeah. Sorry, that made me think of season 2 when they're going to the race, and I wanted more of the Ascot Gavat kind of. I can't. Now the song's going to be stuck in my head. Okay. It's inevitable. Yes. The intrigue and the Featherington name drops. Because it said something like with her sisters, and at first I was like, are they referencing that maybe there's going to be a new entry to the family, so we'll get kind of the dynamic? Oh, no, I had a thought. I remember what the thought was. They talk about Penelope being in this new role, or not being the role that her mother always assumed she would be, which, as we know from the book, is this idea of her caretaker. Are we going to get Sophie in the Featherington household? Which would then immediately set up season 4 as Benedict's season, when they are already dancing around so many spoilers for Benedict per the panel. Like, that's my thought. especially combined with the idea that at this point, and granted, I don't know what season 3 is going to bring for her, don't think Eloise is ready for her romance yet. So I don't know. That's another prospect. Absolutely. Yeah. That's the thing, is if that's the case, I'm not willing to fully commit to this theory because of that. Because the stepmother, or the Cinderella of it, is so central. However, also, would they just kind of plop Portia into that role to give her, like, she has the chops, the acting chops to kind of like play, and we clearly love letting her play in those realms. So that may be an option, but at the same time, but then we also, yeah. There's an option, but then, yeah. Sorry, my thoughts are just going crazy now with this, with Sophie and Benedict, which we will get to them. They will have their time to shine, I'm sure. But I was almost fascinated by how little we seem to know more about Penelope and Colin after this. Like, it seems like it's prepping us for a lot of the surroundings and the tone, but I don't know that I know more about the shape of their story than I knew going in to this panel. I don't know if that's just me. And that's where the trick could be, because like the whole idea of him not recognizing her is so central, and him being so oblivious in the book. I don't know. The changes, I think, to Benedict's story are going to be some of the most challenging translations of the series to my kind of thoughts, but that could just be me. But yeah, I don't know about the shape. Like, I don't know. I realize now that I have been just sitting on this. Sorry, I've just been sitting on this episode list for probably an hour now. Yeah, like I want one of the parody things of like the people on the sides is one of the things I loved so much about Mr. Malcolm's List, is like that the servants got like all of these like little asides where they're like, what the heck, So I want, like, just everyone knows. You can't tell me like a world this small that people don't know on some level. So I think some like knowing glances in some of these crowd reaction scenes would be hilarious. I think I'm with you. Like, they're teasing just enough. They're kind of reassuring us, especially the book fans, that what we want and love is going to be there, to the point of like they're referencing scenes from the book that technically don't happen. Like the mirror scene, like they're like the book fans and the mirror scene are getting linked together a lot. But to my recollection, it's just a reference to something they want to happen rather than something that actually happens. So there's enough kind of like promise and teasing, but knowing that the context of it is going to be slightly different, but not knowing exactly what that's going to look like. And I think after season 2, there's more trust as an audience, because, or especially as like the readers to viewers, because we don't, or I didn't know, none of us knew. We'd never seen a romance series of this type translated to screen, so we didn't know what that shift between couples was going to look like. So now we have the ability to kind of test that and stretch that out a little bit, which I think is going to be really interesting to see how this works differently, because we've proven we can do it. Now, how do we keep reinventing it? Yeah, like, because of course they are. We've all been in like middle school. Sometimes I think of like high society as just like a giant middle school, which, take that however you want. I need to Google her name, the new showrunner I do want to talk about that Jess Brownell, because I thought that the conversation with her and around her in this panel was delightful. I really liked how the cast talked about her. I really liked how Shonda talked about her. I really liked how she talked about the material and her vision, this knowledge that she's been with the show since the beginning, what she saw of the show, what she saw of like pushing that. And especially because, you know, there is always concern when a popular property changes hands. And I'm not as deeply enmeshed in the TV world, admittedly, but I just really liked how they were kind of reassuring us that the vision is still there, but there's now this extra exciting new energy. So I'll be interested to see how that translates to the screen for sure. I also think it's interesting because we can see the increase in budget between season 1 and season 2 in a way that I didn't think we would at the time, but clearly do. So I'll be interested to see if we see another budget bump this season. I don't know. Yeah. I just really, really enjoyed how respectful they were of her in a way that like there seemed to be a good relationship there. They had faith. They enjoyed the material. They felt seen and heard. It felt like there was a really great energy. And I'm not saying that in comparison to the way things were before by any means, but I just am happy to hear that there is that level of respect and that happiness, it seems like, on the set. And I agree. We can't have any real judgment until we see it. We don't know what it's going to end up being, but I liked hearing that felt a little bit better because yeah, I had no clue, you know, what we were going to see from this, if we were going to change drastically. This I still don't know about. So I'm sure we'll hear more after we know what the season looks like, because I'm sure they'll talk about it in relation to the plot specifically. But yeah, so we'll see. Anybody else have major thoughts? I don't want to keep you all night by any means, but I am definitely enjoying this conversation. So. I don't want to bookend it with this by any means, but I still don't know how I feel about this wedding. I feel like we're going to be seeing a lot on the Bridgerton socials about this wedding, and I'm going to be real with you. I do not care. I am happy for this couple, and I am happy for their free wedding. But I'm not sure. Yeah, that's fair, and I am too. You all have helped me put together some more of them, to be sure. So we will touch base again. So okay, so actually before we go, and I will announce this more formally as well, but here's what I'm thinking. If you saw my community tab post a couple weeks ago now, I kind of was putting out feelers on what we were thinking about read-alongs. Like, did we just want to do Romancing Mr. Bridgerton? Or did we also want to do the previous books we have seasons for because we just want to be in that Bridgerton mindset? And no wrong answer. And the idea is, again, reading the books at your own pace, at your own will, having a story graph read along where we can kind of pop in and have discussions, and then having that culminate in a live discussion of the book, like a virtual book club. How fun. But it seemed a little split-ish. I'm not sure if Sophie has been cast yet. I haven't seen anything, but I, again, haven't been running in the really clued in circles necessarily. So I do not know. Yeah. Are they getting a honeymoon too? Okay, see, I'm happy for the couple. Like, weddings are not cheap. And those flowers, if they're getting a Bridgerton wedding, those flowers alone I can't even imagine how expensive they're going to be, and they're going to be gorgeous. Anyway, okay, read along. So the vote, was leaning more votes were toward let's read more books, but there were enough people that were like, I'm ready for season 3. So my thought currently is that we do the Viscount Who Loved Me, because we potentially still will have Campany stuff in this season, and then Romancing Mr. Bridgerton. And my tentative timeline thoughts on this, chime in as you are moved, are March reading time for the Viscount Who Loved Me, leading to an April live stream. While in April we read Romancing Mr. Bridgerton, with either a late April, early May, right before the season drops, live stream. So that's where I'm sitting. I haven't formalized anything yet. I know I will have to soon, because we're getting close to March if we want to do the Viscount Who Loved Me too. So if you're interested in the 2 books, let me know. And either way, I will do a more formalized announcement, but I think that would be fun. I don't know. I've already reread all of these books with my romance book club 2 years ago now, but I would like to reread them again with you. So I agree, but it seems like they are ready. They have a schedule started with this. They, gave us some teasers at the beginning of the year. We've got this now. And I think based on the historical release schedule, we can still expect both a teaser and a trailer in coming months. So maybe we'll see each other again sooner rather than later, outside even of the read-alongs. Who knows? But I'd be interested to see what other people think here too. It's going to be a tough balance, because it's going to be keeping us just engaged enough, building that excitement, but not oversaturating us before the episodes drop, especially if we have to sustain that momentum between 2 drops. And then they're going to have the promo push in between the 2 drops. I'm fascinated by the marketing and PR behind something of this size and this popularity. I would be fascinated to hear from the team simply behind the marketing. But okay, great. That's good. Great. Perfect. I will formalize something. I would love all of these as well. Yeah. I would love to see the Sarah McLean Fallen Angels series, the Gaming Hell series, after just screaming about a gaming hell. I would love to see that. I would love to see Lisa Kleypas's Wallflowers, but I don't know if that would be too close. Anything Beverly Jenkins. The thing about Beverly Jenkins is I don't like Westerns, and Beverly Jenkins will convince me I like a Western, but I would really love to see, is it Rebel? The one with where he built her a schoolhouse. Spoiler alert, but the hero builds our heroine a schoolhouse, and it's the most romantic thing. And yes, if this was a Caribbean heiress in Paris, I also would love that. And if you wanted to reread Romancing again, read it with us, or me, or all of us. Yes, hopefully everyone. So yes, I agree. Oh, this has been a lot of fun. Friends. Thank you all for joining me. I am sure we will be chatting more as we lead up to season 3. So it's time. We're in the thick of it. It feels like it's been forever. Yeah. And I would argue that Scandal in Spring is my least favorite of that. It's not a trilogy. There's 4. Quartet. Words again. I promise I know them. I think that's likely. I'm also surprised. I can tell how much I haven't been clued in recently, because I read I want to say a Book Riot article yesterday that a certain large property that had a deal with Hulu potentially dropped. But yes, I could see that happening because they're so popular. I also just binged her new book on audio in a day. I've discovered I really like those on audio. I read The Love Hypothesis, but yeah. But yes, The Wallflowers. My favorite is It Happened When Autumn. Yes, It Happened When Autumn. And then obviously The Devil in Winter is kind of considered the fan favorite of that series. And I find Scandal in Spring so fascinating because it was like we were teased with where we thought it was going to go in Devil in Winter, and then it went in a completely different direction. But it's still, if you like a house party book, yeah, Scandal in Spring is your book. So, yeah. All right. Well, maybe when we're in that kind of Bridgerton withdrawal period, we can do some more romance reads together as well. That would be a lot of fun. So, in the meantime, I'm going to wrap this up for now because this is much longer than I anticipated talking, but I really appreciate you all being here, and I will see you all soon. So thanks for joining me. And if you haven't liked and subscribed, if you're not, I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't ask for that, but I appreciate you being here either way, so no pressure. But yeah, have a good one. All right, I'll talk to you later. Bye.